again and welcome back to another sound design tutorial where today we're going to be taking Zane from the new Borderlands 3. We're going to be taking his Digi-Clone ability and we're going to be recreating the sound you hear when the clone spawns into the game. Before we start, I just want to quickly talk about some updates to scottgamesounds.com and this channel since I've been away. The first thing is I'm doing a little bit of a test. I want to introduce Skype lessons that you can book on my website, which I'll have linked in the description. If you just click on the link, you'll be brought to this page where between Monday and Friday, the 21st and the 25th of October, you could book a Skype lesson with me and we can talk you through Fmod or C# or, using them both together. Anything you like really to do with, that sort of stuff. And this is just, like I said, a little test service. I just want to see if this would be something you would be interested in. So yeah, if you think that you'd like some advice from me when it comes to Fmod and Unity, feel free to check this page out. The second free thing I have new to the website is this page here, Samples and Ambiences. As I mentioned in the last video that I posted about a month ago now, I went around Europe. I went to countries like Germany, Hungary, Austria, Poland, Croatia. And whilst I was there, I took a few recordings. I took my handy dandy Zoom H1N with me, and I got a load of ambiences from, loads of crowds and city talking ambiences to like countryside ambiences, big church echoes and like rivers and stuff, as you can see here. And they're all free for you to download. So again, click the link in the description of this video if you want some free ambiences to add to your sound library. With that out of the way, it's time to jump into the video. So like I said, Borderlands 3 has just come out. I'm absolutely in love with it. So I knew as soon as I heard this game was getting announced, I wanted to do a sound design video on it. I've been playing as the character of Zane. He's like the operative. He's got like, loads of gadgets and stuff to get him through the levels. One of his main abilities is that he can spawn in a digital clone of himself. And I thought that'd be a fun little thing to try out, trying to recreate the sound for it. So what I've been doing is to recreate the sound, and I'm going to show you what it sounds like, in-game, in Borderlands 3 first, but I've been using Serum. Mainly because I've seen a lot of other sound designers talk about Serum a lot recently, so I wanted to give it a go. Not that this is a sponsored video or anything. In fact, I haven't even bought this yet. I'm still using the demo. But it sounds like, it's worth its stuff. So I've been testing it out, and all the sounds I've made for this video, I decided to limit myself to Serum in order to really dive into it and, learn the nitty-gritty of, how to operate it. So that's the plan. Recreate Zane's Digi-Clone sound just using Serum. So let's start by, in case you've not played the game, let's have a listen to how it sounds in-game. Cool. So as you can hear, it's a nice digital sci-fi sound. So that's kind of what we want to go for ourselves whilst, trying to make something unique. Now, before I started making this sound, I actually watched a few videos that were posted by Joshua Davidson. Now, he is one of the sound designers at Gearbox Softwares that worked on Borderlands 3 and worked on some of the sounds. He didn't do all of them. I think there was a small team of them, but he's actually been posting some videos on YouTube, such as this one here, about the process he went through making sounds such as the Maliwan snipers, I think he does the dropships as well. Maybe he'll do more, I don't know, but they were really good videos and they kind of really helped me, dive into the kind of perspective that he goes through when making all these sounds. Which I think is really important. As sound designers, it's always nice to see how other people do them because it kind of opens your eyes a bit. You kind of realize all the different options you have, and you start to feel a bit limited. You think, oh, I've been doing the same thing over and over again. I need to mix up a bit. So that was really good to see his kind of method and how he does it. So if you're interested, definitely check his channel out. There's only 3 videos there, but they're all amazing. So yeah, go check them out. Okay, so as usual, I've broken this sound down into different elements. I've kind of tried to aim for sounds that kind of cover certain areas of frequencies. You've got your lows, you've got your mids, you've got your highs, and I've got 1 or 2 other things to go along with it. So let's start with the sound I created that was to feel the kind of low end of the sound, to make it feel like it's, impactful, it's weighty, and that there's a lot of energy coming from this big flash of light that's constructing a clone of Zane. So let's quickly have a listen to that. There we go, nice and simple. There's kind of like a sweeping sound that goes through, which I kind of stumbled on accidentally whilst messing around with Serum, but I really like it. By the time with the animation, we kind of start with this big flash of light, And then by the time it's gone and the Digi-Clone's there, we hear that kind of zoom, that kind of sweep into it. So let's have a look at how I kind of constructed that in Serum. Now, this isn't going to be a tutorial on how to use Serum. There's really good tutorials out there on it already. A few I watched, and I'll have them linked underneath as well. But I will kind of give you a quick, brief understanding of how it works in case you've not used it. So, like most software synthesizers, you've got your two oscillators here, oscillator A and B. That's kind of where you start. You choose the shape or the waveform you want to use, and that's the base of your sound. You then have options to choose what pitch you'd like to play the sound at. You've got unison mode, which adds multiple voices, so you've got multiple copies of the same wave, which you can then detune so they're not all playing at the exact same frequency. If I quickly use oscillator B as an example, because I'm not using it for this sound, in Serum you can choose, say, a wave, and then using this dial here, I don't know what that stands for, I guess wave position, you can dial it in and you can change the shape of it. And you can, later on, you can use modulators to change this while you're playing it. So, the sound sounds like it's kind of moving and it's not the same thing. You've also got basic options for panning left and right. You've got levels and stuff like that. As well as the two oscillators, you've also got a third sub oscillator if you want like a low frequency in there as well. Let's turn B off so I don't forget. You've also got an oscillator which creates noise, and again you can kind of flick through different not presets, but kind of different samples of noise to use. Once you've kind of got the bass, the sound you want to start with, and the waves, you can then add stuff like filters, which I used a lot for creating my sound. The filters is probably my favorite thing about Serum. They've got these really cool filters, as you can see. Some of them are just mad. Like what is that? You wouldn't use that in music. Well, maybe in like EDM electronic stuff you would, but I've never seen filters quite as sporadic as that. But that's really cool because it brings out all these different frequencies in different ways, especially when you start modulating them, which I'm going to talk about later. But yeah, as well as your kind of basic filters like your low passes, your high passes, your bands, you've got a selection of loads of different filters that you can mess around with to create loads of different sounds with. You've got envelopes, so obviously with envelopes you can control how quickly the sound comes in and how long it takes to fade out. For example, here I've got a very, very quick attack, so it comes in straight away, and actually not much else. It's just in and out. As you can see, there's a little bit of release, not much hold. It's just, it's just as soon as you hit the key, you're going to hear a sound and come off again. But obviously, like most software synthesizers, you can then use extra envelopes which you can attach to any of these dials and control them through the shapes you create with the envelope. You've also got modulators. Like I said earlier, you can attach modulators to your filters, to your shapes and the waves you're using, to again make them move and make them sound like they're not just one buzz kind of playing constantly. Gives it more character and makes your sounds interesting. There's other features too. For example, there's a whole tab for not sound effects, for effects you can add. For example, I've added a little bit of reverb to this one here. But that's the gist of it. You've got oscillators is where you start and create your sound. You can then decorate them by controlling them with filters or kind of limiting some frequencies, bringing more frequencies out of the sound. And then you can make the sound change and move using envelopes and modulators. So now we know the basics behind Serum. I'm going to quickly disable a few things from this sound. So let's first quickly turn off the reverb I've added. Also going to turn off some of the plugins I've added over here. And I'm also going to quickly disable this LFO. And the idea is I just want to quickly show you where I started with, which was these basic shapes here. Now, like I said earlier, with Serum, there's a lot of options you can choose from when it comes to your oscillators and the waveforms that you start with. For example, this one here, if I quickly turn oscillator B off, if I quickly change the waveform shape, you can see it kind of moves smoothly in between each different shape. And if I click on it, you can kind of see that all the different variations you have to choose from when it comes to where you start. With basic shapes, however, there's only a few. There's like 6, 7 or 8 different shapes. What that means, that's fine, but what that means is if you're going to switch between them all, it will switch between them very rigidly, which might not necessarily be a desirable sound, but in this case I thought it sounded very interesting. So what I did, which I'll show you later on, is I modulated this wheel here to kind of rapidly sweep between just a few of these shapes. But before I show you that, I'm going to quickly, turn oscillator B off because I didn't use that. Turn the filter off as well. So now we've just got oscillator A and the waveform it starts on, which is this square wave here. So let's quickly have a listen. There you go, not very interesting, but it's a start. It's low, it's nice and bassy, we can work with it. So, first thing I did, Filters. Like I said, the filters in Serum are really interesting. So I found this really cool one with lots of different peaks and troughs at loads of different places. It looks seemingly random, but what I did is I thought I would modulate that and kind of sweep through the sound to see how that sounded. Now, originally the LFO did not look like that. It looked more like this. I'm going to quickly return it to its kind of default shape. Then we'll re-engage it. So now let's have a listen with the cutoff of the filter being controlled by this LFO. So now it's going to kind of sweep through the frequency spectrum. Cool, there we go. Now we're getting something more interesting. There's some movement to it. Now I wanted something to sound like it was kind of mimicking the speed and the movement of the animation. This kind of sounds very, very symmetrical. It goes up smoothly and then down smoothly. So I was literally just messing around with the shape of the LFO, and that's when I stumbled across this shape, which gives it the kind of slow start, but then a quick sweep into the sound, which, like I said earlier, kind of matches up with the animation where you've got this bright light and then suddenly, bang, it disappears. So let's have a listen to that now. You've got that kind of sweep and that sudden thud that comes with it. Then to make it even more interesting, like I said earlier, I then used the same LFO to control the waveform we were using. But, you know, like I said, when you switch between them, it's not very smooth. They change instantly, but that actually gave a really cool sound. So let me quickly turn that back on and play that for you now. There we go. So a little subtle change, but as you can see, it kind of sweeps through just a few of these sharp waveforms at the end. They're kind of square and the sawtooth waves. Next, I started messing around with effects to make it sound a bit bigger. So as you can see here, I've added reverb from Serum in. So let's turn that on and have a listen. I really like so I used the plate reverb, but I really like that kind of tail. It's not very quiet, but it sounds very metallic. There you go, so that was quite cool. And I was just messing around with the size of it and stuff. And the last thing that really creates the character of this sound, which I started doing a lot more with some of the other sounds you'll see in a bit, is using this Bit Crusher distortion plugin called Crush, which I've used a few times in other videos, I think. But here it worked perfectly because obviously, you know, it's a digital clone. There's a lot of like what are meant to be pixels being shown as it reconstructs him. Breaking the sounds down in this way kind of was like the cherry on the cake for a lot of them. And some of them it actually, you know, was what shaped the entire sound, which I'll show you in a bit. But yeah, let's play that on. We'll also add the the EQ I added, which was just to kind of control some areas. So obviously, like I said earlier, I broke all these sounds down into different kind of sections of, you know, the frequency spectrum. This is meant to be the low end, so I didn't want it to muddy up the mix with some mid frequencies. I wanted other sounds to fill that space, so I kind of pulled them down. And that kind of metallic reverb tail I talked about earlier, I wanted to bring out a little bit more, so that's why I've brought the high end out. But altogether, we now get this. There we go. So that's sound number one. We've got like a low metallic sounding, almost like a sweep that builds and then kind of hits you with a bit of a thud to kind of show there's a big impact. One thing I also did, let's quickly scroll up, is as you can see, I kind of automated the volume of the sound a bit. So again, just to emphasize that sweep, we've started at a low volume and then brought the level up gradually as it, you know, builds. So the next sound is the first part of the mids of this sound. So let's have a listen to that on its own. There we go. Now it's kind of getting really sci-fi, kind of traditional zappy sound. And let's combine that with the lows. There we go. So we've got a cool sound already. So just like last time, I'm just going to quickly turn everything off and we're going to go step by step through everything that kind of made up this sound, starting with the oscillator. As you can see, to start with, I basically just picked like I was just messing around through all the different shapes and waveforms, so I found something that kind of sounded interesting and, you know, like I said, really zappy and sci-fi-y. So let's have a listen. Okay, good place to start. As you can see, this is something I don't think I did with the first one. Let's have a quick check. No, I didn't. Okay, so with this one, I've used the unison option to add multiple different voices. So as you can see, instead of just having one waveform, we've now got 14 playing, and I've also detuned them. So they kind of, you know, don't sound like it's just one note playing. If I pull the detuning back and play it again for you, sounds boring, doesn't it? So all those voices are now playing basically the same wave at the same note. So if we detune them all ever so slightly, so now evenly, they're kind of all playing at different sort of frequencies. Let's play it again. We get that kind of zappy sound. So that's where we started. Next thing, modulated it again. This time we've kept the basic shape, as you can see. Let's turn that back on and have a listen. Now it's sounding really weird, and again, there's movement. To thicken it up a bit, I introduced some noise, and I just kind of messed around with some different noise samples. So let's have a listen with that introduced. There we go, now it sounded really cool. Next thing was adding a filter. Now, like I did last time, I used a really interesting and wacky filter with a load of different, peaks and troughs. Again, to resonate random frequencies and make it sound really, weird and unusual, I suppose. Sent both the oscillator and the noise generator through. Turn that off. As you can see here, indicated by B and N. And then just like last time, I modulated the cutoff of the filter. So we're sweeping the filters through the frequency spectrum again. But this time, instead of using an LFO, I did it manually with the modulation wheel on my MIDI keyboard. Now, it's not quite clear because it's indicated by a little blue dot along the wheel. But as I play the sound, you should see this blue dot move. And that will kind of show you how I moved the filter. Basically, I just listened for, because if I just moved it randomly, it sounded a bit rubbish. I was listening for kind of where these kind of peaks and troughs affected the sound the most. So I didn't need to move it much, but just moving it a little bit as I sort of held my finger down and played a single note, gave it a sweeping sound, just kind of similar to the first sound, but this one, instead of like starting out with no sweep and then drastically shooting into it, this one's a bit more gradual. So let's have a listen to it with the filter enabled. There we go. So we got that zap, that which was created by the filter. And again, I don't know if you can see it, but that blue dot starts about here, and as the sound plays, that blue dot, which was where the position of the cutoff was, slowly moves down, or quickly, I suppose, moves down, which moves the position of the filter. I added some reverb after that, this time with the O-Real River reverb. I've been using in a few of these videos. Let's have a listen to that now. There we go. Again, it's made it sound more metallic by adding a reverb to it. And then finally EQ'd it, just like I did last time, to kind of restrict it and place it in its own kind of area on the frequency spectrum. There we go. Now the next sound also kind of sits in the middle of the mix. It's another kind of layer, I suppose, similar to the first one. Let's have a quick listen to that on its own. Let's have a listen to it with the other mid sound. And with the low sound, we're getting there now. We're kind of building up all the layers. Now, the first thing you might notice is that this isn't in the form of MIDI data. This is in the form of audio. This is because with this one, what I did is halfway through kind of figuring out the sound for the mid one sound, I printed off, basically, in fact, let me show you. So if I come over here, you can kind of see some random notes I was playing with the mid one sound. And like I said earlier, I was using the modulation wheel and just flicking through that frequency, that filter, see what kind of weird sounds I got. So if I play you some now. Sounds weird and crazy and really cool. And there was a lot of sounds I wanted to use, or rather there was a lot of sounds to use. But what I did is I picked the first one here. If I quickly go back to the beginning, pick the first one I found, where, like I said earlier, it was it was where I moved the modulation wheel only slightly in a certain area to really bring out, a cool inflection, a cool change. Found another one later on that I wanted to use, and originally what I was going to do is blend this original sound with this one here. Which is why I had to print it off, because obviously with MIDI data you can't kind of crossfade sounds together. Eventually I scrapped that idea and I just thought I'll just layer them on top of each other individually. So there's no real purpose to me printing this off as audio. I suppose I could have just taken the MIDI data here, but it does give you a little bit more control. For example, I can now add fades to it and stuff, which I couldn't do with the MIDI data. But as you can see also here, this is this top track here printed off. Which I might keep, actually. It's kind of handy to have sci-fi, weird, wacky sounds like that on hand. So there you go. That's kind of, like I said, this was a lot of experimentation. So there's no real reason as to why I've got one mid section as MIDI data, the other as audio. It was just kind of, how it ended up. But like I said earlier, this is basically a copy, or not a copy. It kind of derives from this basic formula I created in Serum for the first sound. We're using the same kind of waveform, same filter and stuff like that. So when it comes to this sound on its own, if I quickly disable just the reverb and the EQ, this is what we have. There you go. So you can kind of hear the similarities between this and that. Then I added some reverb. Let's have a look at what I did there. So just a little bit, as you can see, about half wet but mostly dry with a short decay time. A little bit of width to widen it out and use the stereo image. Yeah, let's have a listen to that with reverb. There we go again. I love how these reverbs kind of make it sound more metallic. And then EQ, like I said, kind of restricts it to its own section. As you can see here, however, there's more highs in this one, where the original was really focused on the mids. This is now like mid-highs, so your 2Ks to 10K kind of area, this section here. Now, it sounded really good already, and we could leave it here, but I kind of wanted like a high shimmer to, because if I quickly click here and click on the animation, it's very bright. So I wanted something to reflect that, which is where this section comes into play, the kind of high-end sound. Let's have a listen. There we go. It's like a high tremolo-y shimmer. Then let's quickly layer on the old sounds with it. So let's add in mid 2. Let's add in mid 1. And finally, let's add in our low sound. There we go. So again, let's break this sound down, starting with actually how I played it. So far with all this, these Serum sounds, I've just been holding one note with a waveform or two, and then just kind of messing around with modulators and filters. That's how I've been getting the sound. With this, however, as you can see, I kind of layered up a few different notes, and I think originally they were kind of, there was some kind of musicality to them. They were like perfect fifths of each other, but I kind of moved them around a bit. I didn't want it to sound too musical. I didn't want this to sound too harmonic and perfect, so I kind of just ended up picking some random notes just to thicken it up a bit. But anyway, let's have a look at what I did in Serum. So actually, as you can see here, there's a lot more going on effects-wise, and there's also more going on in terms of the starting sounds. So let's quickly disable some of these, and we'll break it down again. So not much in terms of modulation and filters this time. Instead, we're taking a really thick bass and we're kind of using loads of processing and effects to create the sound we want. So starting with, let's turn that off as well. Starting with these two oscillators, we've got a basic shape in the form of this sawtooth. I think that's a sawtooth. A sawtooth wave, and again, I'm using unison mode to add more voices and detune it to make it sound thicker. Let's have a listen to that. There we go, so quite a high shimmer, maybe a bit too intense at the moment. Let's have a listen to it with oscillator B. There we go. Now that adds a kind of another dimension to it. But now we've got two different bass sounds to work with here. You've got kind of the high shimmer, and you've got kind of not low, but you've kind of got like a nice hum that sits underneath it. And next, added some noise. Again, found a noise I like the sound of, and just layered that in underneath. Not too, as you can see, level wise, these two are quite high. Well, it's still quite high. But it's not the set focus, it's just kind of thickens up the sound by, filling in some frequency gaps. So let's have a listen with noise. There we go. Then filtered it so we don't get all that harsh low rumble. And then from there, it was just messing around with different effects. So let's have a look at the first one, which is reverb. This time I've pulled the dry signal all the way down, and I've just maxed up all the wet signal. Let's have a listen to that. Now again, short decay time because the animation is quite quick. We don't want a massive long tail. Width-wise, I've gone all the way, so now it's a stereo field where all those kind of, as you may have noticed, we started with the kind of low sound, and that was just down the center. It's in terms of the stereo image, that was kind of down the center. Then with the mid sounds, there was a little bit of width introduced. Then with this, we've gone all the way, and that's kind of, I guess, a traditional approach to how you would take making music. If you're making music, a lot of the bassy sounds like the kick drum and the bass would be centered, and then some higher frequency bass sounds like your cymbals would be separated to the sides of the stereo image. Now, obviously, if we were making this, if we were working for Gearbox and this was a sound to be implemented into the game, it would make more sense to make it mono, because that would, if it's stereo, it can kind of confuse a player, especially if it's really wide stereo, in terms of the location where the sound's coming from, because obviously they can kind of move the stereo image by turning their head left and right, or not their actual head, but you know what I mean, turning around in the game. So whilst I do like to take an approach with these sound design tutorials as if we were kind of about to implement this sound into the game, with this, I kind of wanted to use the stereo image a bit more because it helps other sounds, other elements of your sound kind of breathe if you give more room to them by placing other sounds in, left and right of the stereo image or somewhere in the center like that. The point I'm trying to make is I suppose I could have made it more mono, but there we go. That's what I've done. So next is the delay. Let's have a listen to it with some delay. So there's not much, there's not like a a really long delay. There's not a massive amount of feedback, and it's not very, you know, the gap in between each sound isn't very long. It's just a way of thickening again the sound up a bit. EQ'd it now. Let's have a look at that. So obviously this is the high end sound, so I'm trying to bring out some high end and get rid of all the lows. So I listen to that with the EQ. There we go. Now you can finally hear that that noise is kind of restricted to where we want it. This kind of high end area, whereas before it was kind of a bit low and muddy, which we didn't want. This is the high sound after all. Last, I added tremolo and made sure I added this at the end, so every effect got, you know, cut up with the sound. So let's have a listen to that. Cool, so there we go, a fairly quick tremolo, and that's pretty much the whole of the high-end sound. So let's have a quick listen to where we're at now. There we go, so we've basically got the majority of this sound done. However, I wanted to add some extra sounds. So for example, all of those sounds kind of represent this big flash of light and the actual clone being constructed, right? But there's nothing, as you can see here, there's these kind of pixely sparkles coming off him just as the animation finishes, which is what I wanted. And in my head, I could kind of imagine what they sounded like, but I couldn't quite work it out. And this was killing me for ages. I knew I wanted it to sound like it was moving a lot, because obviously if I mute the master track and just play the animation, it's sparkly and it's moving and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of flickering. So in my head, I was thinking, right, I want something that flickers and moves a lot, that's chopped up with a lot of different frequencies, you know, it's kind of go beep, boop, boop, beep, 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 and sounded like a computer. That's what I had in my head, couldn't figure out how to do it. And earlier I mentioned that I started messing around with this plugin here, the kind of bit crush and distortion plugin. So what I did is I combined that with the high-end sound I just showed you, that kind of shimmer, and I ended up with this sound here. There we go, that's exactly what I wanted. And again, that was just me stumbling around and messing around, you know, with elements I'd already come up with and kind of combining them together. But there we go, that's kind of what I had. So when it comes to making something sound really digital, bit crushing and distortion is a good way to go. So let's have a quick look at Serum and how I came up with this sound. Like I said, it was basically a copy paste of the high shimmer. The main difference is the envelope. So where the high shimmer kind of had a bit of a release, a bit of a tail as it faded out, this is a bit more harsh. Because these, like I said, these kind of sparkles, these pixels, they instantly flick in and out. So this had to be quite quick moving. So that's why the envelope looks like that. As you can see, I've kind of rearranged some of the effects. So now we've got tremolo at the beginning, which again, like last time, is designed to cut it up. So again, instead of getting, as you can see, I've recorded it in a similar way. I've just held a key down on my keyboard to get the sound, but then chopped it up with the tremolo. So we get that kind of, we get separation, which kind of represents each pixel, I suppose. Delay again, that's pretty much, I think, the same delay from before, I suppose. In fact, let's do what we did last time. So let's break it down. So starting with Serum, let's have a listen to what that sounds like. Okay, so you can hear it's the same sound as before, but now we've just cut it up, or sorry, we've, you know, controlled the envelope. So let's add the tremolo and have a listen. There we go. So we're now kind of separating it a bit. Let's add the delay. And actually, now listening to the delay, I don't think the delay really adds anything. So I think for this, I'm actually going to, well, I suppose it doesn't matter now, you'll see why. But because, I think in hindsight, because this doesn't really add much, I'd probably remove that. Next is the EQ, again, bringing out the highs. This time, really bringing out the highs and really restricting those mids. There we go. And finally, the cherry on the cake, the thing that really makes up the sound is this bit crushing plugin. And I kind of flicked through some of the presets. Had a mess with, you know, the dry and wet levels, and this one was really good because, as you can see, this one is using modulation, and what it's kind of doing is it's modulating as the sound plays. It's modulating the amount of distortion you hear, which I think really helps with the variety when it comes to hearing all these different pixels coming in and out. That's how you get that kind of beep, boop, 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 beep, and the kind of difference in tone and pitch almost. So let's have a listen with that. There we go. Cool. So whilst modulating the distortion itself was really good because it gave me the sound I wanted, I didn't want it to sound random each time. Do you know what I mean? Like listening back to the sound, that it was always going to sound different because, you know, the position of the distortion each time is going to change where it's been modulated randomly. So what I did is I printed it off twice, as you can see here. Let's quickly mute that because now I'm not using this MIDI track. I'm now using 2 audio tracks. So now we've got the sound, but it's not randomly changing each time. Basically, what I did is I printed it off a couple of times until I got the kind of sequence I wanted that sounded really cool and almost not perfectly, obviously, because it's moving so quick we can't tell what these pixels are doing, but kind of matched up with the what looked like some pixels are bigger than others, if that makes sense. What fitted the animation best. So after rendering out that track a couple of times, I found 2 different variations of that sound that I liked. I printed one off in mono, as you can see here, and one in stereo. Reason why is I wasn't really sure, again, I wasn't really sure whether I wanted to go for something mono or have a bit of width to it, but what was nice is by using them both, it kind of gives you a mid-side option, I suppose. You can kind of, by using the faders of each track, you can kind of decide how mono you want the sound to be and how stereo just by adjusting them. So you can actually get, if you want, you can get a kind of nice mix between the two, which is kind of what I've gone for here. So let's have a quick listen to the one I chose to be mono. And then the one I chose to be stereo. And then together we get this. There we go. So like I said, or, like I was aiming for, I guess, I finally found a nice cool sound that represented these digital sparkles and the kind of randomness and the variation that came with them. Nearly done. Let's have a quick listen to all the sounds we've covered so far. Let's layer them in again. So let's start with the, not that one. Let's start with the low sound. Then let's add mid 1. Let's add mid 2. Let's add the high sound. And let's add our digital sparkles that kind of follow off and act as the tail of the sound. There we go, sounded really cool. Now, I was just focusing on the animation itself, but since I was messing around with Serum quite a bit, I stumbled on quite a nice digital hum, which wasn't, it's not too hard to make a kind of static-y electronic hum. But as you can see, obviously, this, you kind of spawn in the digital clone and he's there and he's, he's made of electricity and, he's digital. So he needs a kind of humming sound to go with it. So messing around with Serum, I came up with this. So the idea being that, whilst you're playing the game and you spawned him here, and you kind of hear that whilst he doesn't move, but whilst he does his thing, whilst he shoots the enemies, you kind of hear that, representing him. So let's now have a quick listen to the whole thing with the hum. Maybe bring it up a bit. There you go. But there you go. You get the idea. So let's have a quick look at Serum. Again, so I found 2 interesting shapes that I wanted to use as the base. Again, I've kind of up the unison on them both. In fact, let's do what we always do. Let's quickly disable a few things and start from basics. Let's start with oscillator A. Let's have a listen to that. So we've got kind of a low rumble, almost sounds kind of spooky if you had that on its own. But yeah, to make sure it didn't sound too harmonic, I just detuned it and added a load of voices in again. Let's have a listen to oscillator B on its own. So there you go, now it sounds very staticky and, like it's made of electricity. And that on its own actually sounded really cool. I like that. Let's combine the 2. So now we've got a mix of frequencies. We've got oscillator B kind of being the more higher mid end, creating the kind of staticky digital feel. Then you've got the low rumble being created by oscillator A, which is a bit more smoother. After that, again, I just found another filter, another really random sporadic-y one that sounded really cool. Added that. And then I added an EQ, which just cut off the lows and the highs to kind of control it a bit more. So let me turn it down so it's not too loud, and have a listen to it with them. And there we go. That's pretty much the whole sound. So that is everything for this sound. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed my take on Zane's digital clone sound, and I hope you're enjoying Borderlands 3. Because it's amazing, and I'm probably going to go away now and play it some more, even though I shouldn't, because I've been playing it too much. But yeah, let me know if there's anything else you want to see from this channel in terms of sound design, if you have any ideas. The reason why I made sure I did something that sounded sci-fi, digital, and electronic because of a commentator, a commenter who asked if I could do some more sci-fi stuff. So hopefully you've been pleased with what you've seen from this video. But the point is, if you want, you're more than welcome to suggest stuff. I'd be happy to take a look at them. Keep an eye out for some more Fmod and Unity tutorials as well. Hopefully do some more of them. And like I said, check out those 2 new services. Let's go back. 2 new free services I've got on my website. If you want to book a Skype lesson with me, or you just want to download some free ambiences, you're more than welcome to. And of course, check Joshua Davidson out. Check his videos out. The guy's a really cool sound designer, and I'm very jealous of him being able to work on Borderlands 3. That must be a dream. Anyway, I've said enough. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.